Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for coming. Oh, I got like waves back. This is great. I know, I love it. Thank you for coming, and thank you so much to Vogue and Condé Nast for hosting us, providing all the pizza and drinks. Feel free to get up if you need to. My name is Kate. I'm one of the co-founders of Voices of Product that are putting on this meetup tonight. Other co-founders are Preeti, who will be moderating, as well as Carolyn and Marissa, who can't join us tonight. But if you come to any of our other events, you'll see them as well. We started Voices of Product a little over a year ago now to showcase a diverse set of product leaders that we knew and loved from our own jobs, but also we're starting to learn from the community and everybody within the product development lifecycle. So have that be design or data or product or what have you, to get together and start talking about the topics that we really enjoyed. So far, we've heard from leaders in civic tech, education tech, heard from people on how to run a side gig. And then tonight, we'll also hear from leaders in beauty and tech. So I'll hand it off to Preeti.
Thanks, Kate. I'm so excited to see you guys here. First of all, I know Kate kind of thanked Condé Nast, but Audrey over there, like, I just want to give her a shout out for organizing all of this. And just Condé Nast in general for being amazing partners to organize an event with. They really support the community. And we're doing, by the way, I'm at Condé Nast as well, so that's why I say we. We're doing amazing things with, innovative things with how people interact with content and how people engage with life around them in general. So if you're interested, we always have jobs open, so hit me up. There's people from Condé in the back row. Woo! Just talk to any one of us, look up on our jobs board. Highly encourage you. We have an engineering blog. Like, there's amazing things happening here. Okay, so let's move on to the event. So today we're talking about the rise of beauty and fashion tech, which is a topic that's been so prominent in the recent years, but I think I personally haven't encountered any forum that really openly talks about how innovative this world has become. We have a few leaders here who've really just kind of transformed this world. And so why don't we start with introductions?
I'm Kate. I'm a product manager at Vogue. Kelsey, senior product manager at Runway, previously Birchbox. Fashion.
Christine Park, I'm a co-founder of ShopSailo. It's an app that makes Instagram shoppable. And prior to then, I've been in the fashion retail industry for about 15 plus years. I was the CEO for Stephen Allen and for Rogan.
Chaya Cooper. I've been in fashion tech since before that word existed. And I am the founder and chief product officer of Conophy, which is AI software for retailers to be able to sell the right products to the right customers in any channel.
Hey, my name is Jan. I'm the head of user experience at Glossier. Glossier is a digitally native beauty brand, and we make a collection of highly curated skincare and makeup essentials. Just launched body as a third category last week.
Awesome. So excited to have you guys here. So let's dive right into questions. So this is for all of you. So what are some common themes in fashion and beauty and how they're merging with technology, and talk about the impact on the user? Jan, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I mean, coming from a direct-to-consumer brand, I think that technology really has enabled consumers to build a relationship with brands, and I think that has an impact across obviously like fashion and beauty, but other industries as well. I think technology as an enabler to really build a direct relationship with customers is a big change.
Yeah, and kind of going off of that, I think there's a couple layers to that. I think like in the physical sense, technology is totally changing fashion like in the long run. I think there's a lot of
I think we're at a point kind of where everyone wants to like maximize like every ounce of utility and everything and be like the most productive. And you're kind of looking at it from like a fashion sense, like fashion is getting more technical, and it's not just seen as like, oh, this, like, no, that's a beautiful dress. Now it's like, oh, that's a beautiful dress, and we could make that much smarter. And you see companies like Google, and there's a really cool company out of Brooklyn that's like a fashion tech incubator called Manufacture, and they're doing a lot of stuff. And obviously this is like very long lead, like we're not there just yet, but they're doing a lot of stuff to craft smart fabrics and things that are conductive so that you could charge, you don't need like your phone wallets in your coat pocket and, for a pocket, which to pocket. So like now it's like how do we make that more productive? And I think you're kind of seeing that shift where fashion is reacting because it now wants to be smarter. And fashion companies want to be smarter too. And then I think on the other sense, like going off of what Jan said, from like a personalization standpoint, people now want everything that they see like online, they want it really fast. And I think that they want it just for them. I think there's like a uniqueness that when you're shopping in store, you can look and you can touch and you can feel. And I think now companies are trying really hard to get that online. And I think, again, even with, you see companies reacting to that too, like Adidas, like they're printing, I think it's like sometime in 2018, but they're working on using like 3D printing so they can print custom sneakers in store. So you can have them like the next day. Like technology has created this like massive sense of urgency. And I think that now fashion and beauty, they're not just trying to react to that, they're also trying to how can we make our experiences more high touch and more personalized too. And I know this Vogue, that's in Condé Nast in general, we're trying to look at how can we make our user experience more personalized, because now it's just demand. It's not just something that like, oh, it's a nice to have. It's nice when you go to like a beauty website and they remember your past purchases. Now it's like, oh, I need to get those really quickly. Like they need to be there at the forefront. Otherwise I'll go someplace else. Just you want to streamline that path to purchase or the path to inspiration. You just want to make that as easy as possible.
I think, and to add to what you said also, technology, whether, when you look through the years of like the invention of the washing machine, everything was for convenience. So, technology is about convenience now. And with that convenience becomes this personalization. So now there are websites where you could go design your own bag and have it in 3 weeks. It's not just, an embroidery on it or just like a printed, you can actually just design, pick your own, leathers. On the other side, also in terms of retail, of making products better, fabrics better, technology on all levels of retailing, whether it's fabric manufacturing and just sort of the processes of manufacturing. The supply chain is very long. So anytime you make a jacket, a shirt, a pair of shoes, there are like 50 different suppliers involved in making the pair of pants that you're wearing today, right? Because you have buttons, you have thread, you have the designers, you have the technical designers. So, and a lot of times they're all over the world, right? So we're shipping a lot of things. So we're seeing a lot more development for the first time really in sort of that supply chain technology, whether it's meeting designer to fabric, but also designer to factory, so that the process of actual design gets to that implementation part much faster than it was before, because it was done by hand before, right? So now we have computers, we're able to digitally process patterns. So I think there's so many layers. That's on the back side. On the front side, then now we're seeing so many direct to consumer is sort of the buzzword of today. We were just talking actually about how technology changes so quickly. Rent the Runway that launched 7-8 years ago. At that time, that was an incredibly innovative idea with the e-commerce technology that was available today at that time. So many people have talked about luxury brands. Why are they so slow to have adopted e-commerce? When you look at technology 7-8 years ago, what didn't exist, brands need to tell a story to their customers, right? On every level, whether it's a mass level or a luxury level. But particularly as you get to more luxury levels, there was this desire for people to really interact with the brand. I think technology is caught up, starting to catch up. And we don't even know what that's going to look like in 10 years. But 10 years ago, Glossier could not make a website look the way it does today. Like, trust me, because I built a website 10 years ago, and we couldn't make something look that pretty. right? So, or function in the way that it does with as many choices and, you know, here, you know, all the suggestions and the remarketing and, you know, that technology didn't exist. So I think that we're seeing sort of this rapid growth. It feels like, and now it's so normal, right? This is the bar is set. But I do think that, you know, it rapidly, you know, we know that technology geometrically advances, right? 10 years ago, we didn't have AI in the space. Now we do with click to fit. So, you know, there's all these sort of advances that are coming up. And I think that that's where this merges with brand to technology. And then that user experience just makes it to them feel seamless as if this is the only thing that's ever existed for them before.
I think playing off of that, it's a really interesting concept where technology just now is catching up to what we already had. Where you think about, you could walk into a store, it was curated for you, there was an assistant there that could tell you what your size was, that could get you that item that same day. Well, what is e-commerce trying to do? You're trying to personalize and curate the experience. You're trying to optimize your supply chain so you can get that item to the customer same day. So we're just trying to replicate what the customer already had access to. We're just trying to do it at a much larger scale and on a digital realm.
I would actually shift the perspective a little bit, and from where I'm sitting, what I've seen a lot is that the industry is finally embracing technology. And I remember I started out in the fashion industry in the late 90s, and what I heard then and what everybody told me, that everybody had been saying for years and years and years, is it's never been this bad. And for many, many years, that's what they always said. The entire industry was saying how sales are worse, returns are worse, markdowns are worse, everything's worse than it ever was. And when e-commerce first rolled out, the retail sector in general was, and specifically the fashion sector, was far more resistant than any other industry to integrating e-commerce. Luxury brands resisted it for years. And I remember I was at Bloomingdale's in the late 90s. We literally had nothing. We didn't even have email. I'm not exaggerating. Everybody bought data. Nobody used it. The way that the large, in traditional retailers made their buying decisions were based on what they felt in their gut, their expertise. Didn't matter how much money they spent on that, they didn't actually use it. And the e-commerce is still a very, very small part of the industry. To this day, it's only 15% of the fashion industry is sold online, and that includes what's sold at the large retailers. But those large retailers haven't been using data. They made decisions based on whatever the buyer thought. And you have brands, many, many companies that they have bad season because they made the wrong buys. Their companies are finally starting to embrace data and recognize that they can't look at it as fashion. It's much more about apparel. Only about 20% of consumers are actually fashionistas. Only about 20% of consumers can find clothing that fit, quite literally. Almost no clothing looks good on most customers. If you make clothing that doesn't look good on most customers, that's what they care about, guess what, you have a problem. So it's been this build it and they will come model where you expect customers to have to work really hard to spend their money. And as time becomes more and more valuable to customers, and things like the internet has made people expect more. You expect to spend less time. You expect to have more things handed to you for free. You expect other people to do the work for you or technology to do the work for you. And people have much less patience and much more things fabric for their attention. Plus, more women are working and have careers nowadays than they did 20 years ago. So, and to this day, 56% of the market is still women's clothing. Men's is about 20. So you're talking about the majority of women are what drive sales. And women just don't have time and patience and energy to shop past the age of 25. Once they start developing careers and focusing on having a family. So unless you make it easier, they simply buy less. And the conversion rate in stores is still only 25%. Online, it's less than 3% for most retailers. But most people don't actually enjoy shopping. They're shopping for a purpose. If customers are walking to the store and looking to spend money, and they walk out without buying something, guess what? You lost money. And then the fact that, depending on what products are sold online, anywhere from 40% to 75% is returned. That actually costs the retailers money. forget about it, it's a lost sale. It actually costs retailers money, which is why the majority of e-commerce brands are actually losing money. Forget about what's out there, the numbers that are being touted about. Very often, even Amazon only has about 1.3% EBITDA on their US sales.
Well, they just started, they
Right.
just went positive last year, right?
Exactly.
It's a big deal.
And in
Yeah.
Europe, they're not even
Yeah.
cash positive yet. And they're considered the gold standard.
Can you guys speak up a little? It's hard to hear back here.
Sorry.
Can let us know if you can't hear anymore, because we don't have.
And on top of that, if somebody goes in to buy a dress or a suit and they walk out with a belt or a pair of socks, that counts as a conversion rate. Except that you actually really lost a $300 sale or a $1,000 sale for $12 pair of socks. Separate from that, our behavior and success rate drives what we do. So the harder you have to work to do something, the less success you have, the less often you buy it, you do it. So if I need a pair of jeans, and every time I go shopping for a pair of jeans or a dress or whatever it is, I have to spend, the average consumer spends about an hour and a half at a time, twice a month, both online and in store. And you're talking about it's only 25% conversion rate online, to about 3% in store. The more times you try and fail, which you're doing on a regular basis, the less you try, the less you look, the less you spend. And at the end of the day, the majority of people are buying clothing because they care what they look like and they want to look presentable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about it. It's not, most people don't care about keeping up with the trends, they don't enjoy it. They want to like what they're, how they look, and they want to look like how they're presenting themselves to the world. And the fashion industry is slowly starting to recognize that. The fact is, 67% of women are above a size 14. Only 20% of sales are above a size 14.
Yeah.
And the big change that I've been noticing in the last year is that the industry is starting to actually embrace the fact that we need to start making decisions based on data, whether that's data through analyzing Instagram or actually analyzing what our customers are telling us. And which is with clothing, that's honestly the way you have to make much more of the decisions than any other product category, because clothing is much more qualitative as opposed to quantitative. So unless you have meaningful data on customers, you can't necessarily reverse engineer the information. But retailers have had a lot of information about the customers for years.
I'm going to request you to speak up again.
Sorry. Sure.
Guys, we really can't hear you at all. Yeah, missed all of that.
There are seats up front if you guys are a little too far. Move
We're
out.
going to try to speak up, guys. Sorry. So this actually brings me to my next question. With all the digital and technology revolution happening in beauty and fashion, what are the challenges right now, right? Like you started it off with talking about the sizes and not appropriate usage of data.
Well, kind of going off of that, like how you said, like a lot of the fashion and beauty is kind of catching up to technology, and like just now trying to be smarter about the way that these industries are using it. I think a huge piece of that is that time is a huge challenge because things move so quickly. And I mean, so Condé Nast is historically a print media company, and now it's shifting. It's shifting to become a technology company, and that can't happen overnight. Those types of cultural changes take years. And again, you have a massive staff. It's just not easy to do that overnight. And so I think that there's a reason there's a lag between fashion and beauty catching up with the technology that we're able to use, especially here across all of our brands. But I do think though that now we're in a position where, like you said, brands want to invest and they see the power of it. But it's also from a resource perspective, just being practical, it's really hard to know, to forecast how big something's going to be. So years ago, Chanel wanted nothing to do with the internet because they want to be completely unique and exclusive. But now it has to partake because that's where everybody is. So you and now also digital is the way to grow a company because you need scale to monetize pretty much anything. And the internet's the easiest way to do that. But I do just think that unfortunately time is the biggest challenge because you spend all of this time producing, and again, from a product standpoint, you spend all of your time creating a product that by the time it gets to market, it's already outdated. And I think, so that was this philosophy for years, that things just took so long to create. I remember going back, so I started working at this was 8 years ago, but we were trying to like come up with an idea for like a beauty shopping app. And we like had this like massive like flow chart, and we're like, okay, so here's the app in the center. And then we started just like putting features. We had like 30 something features on this chart. And we're like, okay, so realistically, how long would this take us to do? We're like, okay, we could probably have it halfway through the following year. So we were talking about this thing taking like over a year to develop, but that's just unrealistic now. But at the time, that was just like, oh, okay, well, we'll just keep talking about it. We'll keep pushing it. And, you know, and things just moved at a really slow pace, but now we don't have that luxury. And I think that as a result, that challenge of time has forced us to change the way we operate. And so, and I'm sure you guys can tell this too, but like we're switching like more to like an agile like method like takes a long time, especially too, it's a cultural thing. You can't just say, oh, we're going to try this process tomorrow and expect operations to change. You have to get everybody on board to like agree that this is the way that we're going to start making decisions. But I just think that like we've all had to change the way that we work in order to adjust to the fact that we just don't have like the luxury of time anymore.
And I think some of what's, to build on that, I think some of what's changed is that retailers are starting to run scared because they are finally actually seeing the path that they're going down. It's a lot of what you see in, even written by analysts, is not necessarily representative of the actual state of affairs. Saying that Amazon rules the fashion industry or that they're about to outdo Macy's sales is very far from reality. Given that only 15% of fashion is sold online and Amazon only has a fraction of that, it's kind of obvious. But it's moving in that direction, and Amazon is investing millions and millions of dollars every year in upping the ante on what they can do in terms of, they recognize the majority of their sales are going to come from fashion. So they just patented several technologies that allow them to literally create mass customized just-in-time inventory so that customers can have clothing that actually fits them on the spot. That is going to force the fashion industry as a whole to address the fact that clothing doesn't fit customers, because guess what? If you can't find clothing that fits you easily at a reasonable price, in a design that you sort of like at the right price point, and you can find it on Amazon, that is where you're going to start shopping. So from that perspective, there's a lot of changes that are coming out from the tech sector that is forcing the industry to recognize that they have to start changing. And the other thing is that for the last 3 or 4 years already, it's been kind of the dirty secret that e-commerce is negatively hurting sales. And returns is a really big problem. But there's also been this recognition that we can't afford to not do it. But given that the majority of the growth of what's happening online is at a much faster pace than what's happening in store, even though the majority of sales are still happening in store only grows about 1.3% a year, whereas online has grown between 15 and 20% a year. So even though it is currently at 15%, as online sales grows to a greater percentage, which it is, it brings the profitability of the company down significantly. So what companies are recognizing is they have to figure out how to get the e-commerce portion right in order to not keep losing money with it, because otherwise their whole company is going to be losing money. And they also recognize that there's a reason why e-commerce has been taking off and retail has not been as successful as it has been lately. And they're trying to address those problems because they recognize that the majority of the industry is still at brick and mortar. It's where you're much more likely to have upselling. When people return products, they're much more likely to buy additional products. You'll buy more at a time. Higher price points, certain items would fit as a problem as long as the technology isn't there to make that easy to determine remotely. There's a whole bunch of reasons why brick and mortar is still the bread and butter of the industry, and why companies like the Runway and even Amazon are starting to roll out to brick and mortar. And the industry is really starting to get experimental and trying models to figure out how to do brick and mortar better and how to make it easier for the customer and make it more fun and enjoyable. And for me, what's really cool is I've been saying for years, the idea is to take the best of what's online and bring that into a tangible universe to improve the in-store experience and vice versa. How do you replicate the in-store experience online to make it better, faster, and easier for the customer?
That actually, I want to hone in on that. Kelsey, do you have any thoughts with like brick and mortar and like the digital experience? And
yeah, for sure. So Run the Runway has opened up 5 different stores now. They've had one in Las Vegas. We shut it down for some interesting reasons, meaning, so a couple interesting tidbits. We run the largest dry cleaning facility in operation in the US. You wouldn't expect that. And we found that, unfortunately, customers in Las Vegas were renting these dresses, getting very happy, having a fun time, and the cleaning costs on the garments and the repair costs on the garments in the Las Vegas store were higher than any of our other stores. So, yeah, so that's why we had to shut that store down. But so basically, you know, the Rent the Runway started essentially as a brand where you could come get a super high formality dress. So for a wedding, for a gala, for prom, for some high stakes event. And over the last 2 years, they've been experimenting with really shifting what Rent the Runway is and how you interact with it as a customer. And we're really now more a brand where we want to be your rotating closet. We want to be your closet in the cloud. You just want to have a nice shirt for a date? Do you want to have some statement pants for brunch with your girlfriends? Do you want to have a nice blazer for, you know, an interview, for example? Rent the Runway wants to be the solution to that problem. And so we found that in retail, we actually, we launched a program called Unlimited, which is a subscription to our service. And so you can have a certain number of items for an extended period of time. You just pay a flat monthly fee. And we found that retail in particular, introducing this program and introducing the ability to swap out your items in the retail store has fundamentally changed how our customers engage with us, where, you know, we were seeing customers were renting, you know, a couple times a year. It's gotten to the point where in some of our stores, our customers are coming in 1, 2, sometimes even 3 times a day, where they are literally coming in, going to a meeting in one clothing, one, you know, outfit, coming into the store, changing, going into like, it's insane. And so, you know, they don't see our retail store as a store. They see it as a place where they can access our service more often and more frequently. And we have great associates that work in the store, and we've really seen, you know, the retail store is a platform for us to engage with our customers and really form an even stronger bond. I mean, there's like hundreds of Yelp reviews about some of our stylists about how like they saved my life. They, you know, got me my husband because he wouldn't have me, you know, he picked out the perfect dress for me and blah, blah, blah. So it's like the retail store is so much more than like this transactional thing where you're going in, you're looking for something, you're finding it, you're paying, and you're leaving. Like this becomes really your chance to form a bond with a company and really gain the full benefit of the service that they provide. And so we've seen that just in the last few months since we introduced that swap functionality, we haven't even messaged it or promoted it to customers. Our customers just like found out about it, and it's become, you know, more than 50% of our traffic in stores are these subscription customers coming in to leverage this service.
I just want to, yeah, sorry, just, I think we're talking about a lot of different changing topics, like from like, you know, size revolution to, you know, brick and mortar retail. And for me, I think, you know, I've been in retail for so long. I love stores. I don't think that, you know, you'll read, you know, all these newspaper articles, brick and mortar is dead. Like, it's just not. Like, people need things to do. Right? I just like, you know, like we want stuff to do. And so, but definitely, you know, with younger generations, they definitely are going more towards experience, right? So I think, and retail has a couple of different challenges. We're talking about 2 different models, right? So we have a direct-to-consumer model, like Glossier. We have a Bloomingdale's model, which is a wholesale model, right? And then we have experiential models, which are sort of like revolutionizing fashion ideas, meaning that you don't have to buy your fashion, you can rent your fashion. So I think there are still new, like more ideas to come in that fashion space of Rent the Runway of like, what can I rent or borrow or swap, or, you know, I think that there's more ideas to come, and I'm sure many of you will have them in the upcoming years. So I think, like, you know, when we look at all these channels in terms of, let's look at it in terms of problems versus progress, right? So problems were now currently the retail model with the wholesale model, you know, that's where wholesalers go buy something from somebody. that made it through a very complicated supply chain. They have to make money, they have to mark it up. Then, you know, Bloomingdale's goes and buys that, then they have to sell it to you and make money and mark it up. And now the brick and mortar experience has become a little bit boring in light of online because, you know, and this is another thing that a lot of retailers say is that because of e-commerce competition, a lot of times, let's say I go to Bloomingdale's and I look for this necklace and I'm like, oh, and then I'll search it online to see if I can find it anywhere cheaper, right? And so, you know, we've all done that in the dressing room, right? That it's like, where can I get my $25 discount coupon from somewhere? So, I mean, I think that it's so multifaceted, but also I do think that technology is forcing efficiency. And also because what technology has largely done is that it has empowered the user and the shopper to have a much larger voice in the space, right? So it's no longer Bloomingdale's coming out with their catalog and saying like, this is what you're gonna wear, right? That now it's like, no, I go on Instagram and I decide like, no, you know, I'm gonna wear that from that and that from that, and I'm gonna go find it. And I think that that probably maybe with the size revolution too also gave a space for, you know, I have several friends that are in the inclusive sizing market that have more of a voice. I think that there's more visibility to people. It's not as polished in the past, like, so I think that, you know, technology, for better or worse in some cases, has allowed people to make choices for themselves, right? So that you are kind of the purveyor of your own style. Not to say that you're not going to go look at an influencer, because something like 54% of women say they purchase something after seeing it on an influencer. But more and more now, we're also seeing that people are their own influencers. Like, you're influencing your friend circles, right? Like, you post yourself in like your beautiful pink outfit, you know, and your girlfriends will be like, where'd you get that, girl? You know, and so like, and so, you know, so I think that we're sort of seeing a lot more sharing, a lot more information, you know, being accessed to.
Yeah, you hit on a point that I really want to talk about with Jan, the empowering of the user. Can you talk a little bit more about how Glossier is conveying the unique ethos of the brand via the user experience?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're really a brand that is about, like, as I was mentioning earlier, we're trying to build a direct relationship with you. That's not just us as a brand talking to you and telling you what to wear, but actually taking input from that community of customers and potential customers, and even taking that into account when it comes to product development. Glossier was originally born out of an editorial site called Into the Gloss. Into the Gloss has been around for 7 years now, so around 5 years or so before Glossier even started. The founder of Into the Gloss is also the founder of Glossier, our own brand. Now, we still talk to that community of readers all the time, and one example is that oftentimes, you know, product development actually starts as a blog post. So we have numerous examples. One is a cleanser that we launched, where we wrote a series of articles. The first one actually being like, what is your dream cleanser? What do you want from one? What are you currently using? Who would play your cleanser in a movie? Like, questions like that, where, you know, we just got the community to start talking, and ended up with over 1,000 comments on Into the Gloss first, and then also on Instagram, and took those comments and basically formulated a product brief based on that. So that's one way of doing it. You were asking in general, like, how we basically are able to convey our brand through user experience, right? And I think that given being a direct-to-consumer company, like, obviously there are certain key metrics that are incredibly important to us, right? So conversion rate, yes, we always have to optimize for that. And I think that a lot of times what ends up happening is that, you know, conversion rate and average order value ultimately end up like topping everything. In user experience design, what a lot of people do is they end up just, you know, trying to reduce friction everywhere, and trying to really optimize, every last bit of the purchase funnel, your checkout funnel, and so on. I think the kind of like the next step in user experience is finding the right moments where you can actually, present your brand in a certain personality through the user experience, sometimes at the right moments, kind of like introducing a little bit of friction as well. Good example of that is we launched a balm. So we have a few different flavors of our balm.com, recently launched a collaboration with Milk Bar and their famous birthday cakes, the flavor of the balm. When you added a birthday cake to your cart, what would end up happening is that confetti was coming down from the cart, and it was like small moments that ultimately just are aiming to make you smile. And I think that's something that I try to do a lot in my work too, is kind of like, yes, let's make it as easy and as seamless as possible, but how can we find a few moments in the customer journey where we can actually make people smile and add personality as well.
Yeah, it creates a feeling of reward, and that's important. User experience always makes me think of data. So tell us about how you guys are using data to really optimize and really build your product. And I want to start with you, Chaya.
So I've long taken the approach that for specifically apparel, beauty less so, but for fashion more so, data is really neat. Data can't be approached from the perspective of machine learning or collaborative filtering as a starting point, which is why most of the recommendation technologies that exist that for most CPG products don't work well for apparel, simply because.
Sorry, I know she really wants to hear what you're saying.
Sorry, I'll try.
Speak to her.
Do you just want to come up front?
There's chairs here. I think they're all.
Yeah, there's a chair right here.
Yeah.
There's also noise out there, which doesn't help. So one of the basic problems is, we all know, and men are more likely to observe this because the problem is not as apparent for men's clothing. But with women's clothing, the same exact dress can be worn by 100 different people and look completely different and fit completely differently. And not just in terms of body shape and everything like that, based on how your posture and what you accessorize it with and all these other factors also affect the way the product looks. If you simply work backwards and take the information about a specific pair of jeans that were sold or a specific dress or skirt or whatever it is, you can't know much about who this person was. So 100 people bought this dress, but they don't necessarily have a single thing in common. If you make any recommendations based on other people who bought this dress, you're not necessarily making any sort of smart recommendation. It's only smarter than nothing. So you want to make some recommendation. Since you can't make manual recommendations with another person there, it's better than nothing. But the likelihood of you're getting anywhere close to an accurate recommendation is a lot less than it is, for example, with Netflix, where if I've liked Reese Witherspoon romantic comedies, guess what? I'll like other Reese Witherspoon romantic comedies, and I'm likely to like other Drew Barrymore romantic comedies. And I may even like, some of her dramas. If I bought a pair of Citizens of Humanity jeans that doesn't say anything about what else I'm going to buy, I might decide for once I'm going to splurge on a pair of jeans. It makes my butt look good, or whatever the reason is. I just got a new job. Whatever the reason is, unless you know what the factors that went into making that decision, you can't really gauge anything about my body, my measurements, or what else I buy. Especially because people's measurements change all the time. Clothing shrinks and stretches, and 50% of clothing is altered. Plus, it doesn't necessarily have to fit perfectly for me to buy it. As long as it looks okay, that's really what matters. It can't look like it's huge on me or too small. But give or take 2 or 3 inches in any part of the body, especially if there's stretch in it, it's really okay. You have to have a starting point of understanding the basic principles of what drives this customer's decision. And part of that is price. A lot of that is whether or not it looks good on them, and that is both objective and subjective. Some of that is fit, some of it is their lifestyle, what they're going to have occasion to wear, fabric requirements, things like that. And then there's taste, and taste is, for most customers, about 20% of customers are very fashion focused, and they're trying to create a look, and they enjoy following the trends and all that kind of stuff. 78% of women definitely don't, and about the same number of men. And but they want to look good, and they want to like what they're wearing. And if they're buying something new, they want to like, it needs to be their general taste category. So you have to have a general understanding of what their taste is. Yes, there are some customers that are very, very fashion focused. For those customers, you have to have a much more specific understanding and be getting it right, or they're not going to buy the product. But each of those things are not interconnected. And just because this pair of jeans fits me doesn't mean that the shirt is going to fit me, or that this dress will, or these shoes will, or that the pair of shorts will. You can't extrapolate based on even a similar product category. Once you have a basic understanding of the customer, which is actually not that hard to get, and customers have demonstrated in every industry that if there's a reason for them to give you information, they're willing to. Will you spend 3 minutes or 5 minutes or even 30 seconds if I'm going to make your life a whole lot easier and make it easier for you to save time, get the things that you need, etc.? Almost 100% of consumers will. Within about less than 3 minutes, you can actually get the majority of the information that you need to get a basic understanding of the customer. 15 minutes, you can get a 95% accurate understanding of the customer. If you ask the questions in the right way and use heuristics and cognitive neuroscience and all the basic premises that experts use without realizing, which is exactly the approach that Devon's been taking. On top of that, you can then layer machine learning and neural networks and all these other big data techniques to refine it, to become more accurate. Look at their shopping history, their buying history, what other customers who are actually like them are doing and buying and picking up and then not buying, to sell more to them, to create products that they'll actually want to buy, to merchandise things correctly and upsell, cross-sell, know when to mark down, know what customers are actually looking for. Most women are not that comfortable with their upper arms, especially as they get older. It's almost impossible to find things with sleeves.
So Chaya, I'm actually hearing a theme of how data can be imprecise, or would you say the way data or the information, exact metrics gathered are not valuable?
What I'm saying is that clothing is the most complicated product out there. Okay. And therefore you have to take a very different approach for it than you do with anything else. There's been a lot of data out there. What's been out there hasn't even been used correctly. So for example, to this day, even though retailers have a lot of history, they still sell out of certain sizes all the time. There's really no excuse for that. You have that data. It's important to utilize that properly. And retailers are starting to refine their inventory process and trying to get that correct. So there's a lot that you can do with just basic data. And that's where big data can be really helpful. But if you want to actually really know your customers and sell the right products to the right customers, be able to sell a lot more products, have less markdowns, sell more products at your target price point, less returns, you have to actually know what customers want.
So
and
I
sell
want
to
to
them.
hear, that's interesting. I want to hear what Kelsey thinks about this and how data impacts the runway.
Yeah, so we use data in a lot of different ways. One is, just basic product iteration. So running a lot of A/B tests to see, which version of a particular flow gets the highest conversion, or and we've definitely had similar experiences to like what Jan said, where we saw the data said that this was the clear winner, but we had to make the gut instinct to say that doesn't fit with our brand, and we're not going to go with that. We're going to choose a lower conversion, option, and just because we feel that represents what we want our customers to see in us more accurately. But then also closer to your point, we do use it from a planning perspective. So, we can collect all of this information about what customers are viewing, what they're clicking on, what they're buying, what they're renting, everything in between, what they're asking for, what they're saying in their reviews. I think that's a huge goldmine that both Birchbox and Rent the Runway have, is customer reviews. I'm constantly amazed at how much data the customers are willing to share about their body, and these sensitive topics online and publicly with pictures. And, it's something that we definitely take advantage of because, ultimately when we think about a customer willing to go out on a limb to give us that information, we should be using that responsibly to make their experience better. And so our planning teams use that to determine, what we should be buying for future seasons. We look at, from a operations standpoint, we use that to plan capacity. So we are, right now undergoing a whole multi-month project to basically get ready to expand to multiple warehouses across the United States. And a big part of that is just planning to know when we're going to hit capacity. So, basically we have finite space and finite time. We need to know when we need to have that second facility up and running and working. So we use data, all throughout our process. It's, it drives everything that we do, from the customer experience to how we operate to how we even think about core strategic problems. And, I think that's, a big difference between technology companies and traditional brick and mortar retailers. Technology companies realize that in order to survive and in order to innovate and in order to actually provide the value that you're promising to your customer, you can promise the moon to the customer, but if you can't deliver on it, you're going to get killed. And the customer is just going to go to the next cheapest option because you can't deliver on that. And we rely throughout our entire operation on data to help inform whether we are delivering on that promise and what that promise should be and how we can actually more effectively deliver that promise.
That's also interesting because delivering to the customer makes me think of ShopSailo, Christine. So you guys are revolutionizing how really people interact with Instagram and really the fashion industry in general. I'm interested to know about your revenue model and how you monetize.
We are, we've just finalized a beta, and so we're launching, knock on wood, over this next 4 to 6 weeks. And the app is an app that right now it makes shopping on Instagram seamless. There are a lot of other ones out there. There's Like to Know It, there's Like to Buy, there's a few really great apps in the space. Our differentiator is that we have a seamless push notification that you push that opens a buy page. You're not pushed out into any other e-commerce site. We have a single screen checkout that saves your information. And so you're purchasing virtually in Instagram, and then you're back scrolling. So our revenue model is, we charge our commission to the brand. It's another tool in their arsenal of brick and mortar versus e-commerce. It's another tool available to them. And really also what ShopSailo does, which is our main focus, is we are able to connect an influencer directly to brands. So meaning you're on Instagram, you follow your favorite influencer, they hashtag, a Glossier balm, and you have to now use their URL link in your web browser to then go and find your thing. We have technology that seamlessly allows you to click on that Instagram, like that Instagram, that influencer post, and we're able to push that purchase straight through Glossier, through our app. And also brands like Glossier will be able to create brand ambassador programs, like we talked about earlier, in terms of sharing. We like to share with our friends everything. We like to share with the public everything, photos of ourselves and our problems. The space of the internet has really allowed, since the start of Facebook, right? We all became much more comfortable with sharing our entire lives, sometimes too much, online with our friends. But that being said, it's really utilized the ability for people to garner data when there's trust available. But also more and more we're seeing brand ambassador programs or direct-to-consumer brands, or just even brands utilize what I grew up with my mom, is the Tupperware model, sort of this Tupperware party where you're gathering your friends and you're becoming an ambassador. or an influencer to your friends. So within our app, brands are able to really go out to their customer base. So they can generate revenue in many different ways that way, and then we earn a commission for that.
Awesome. That sounds very interesting. I want to switch to Kate and talk about how Vogue is continuing to be the biggest name in fashion.
Yeah, well,
Using technology.
Yeah. Well, Vogue has a little bit of a different challenge than a lot of like these guys are facing because, as you know, like the industry is now completely oversaturated. Anybody can be an ambassador. There's this like massive sense of connectedness between different types of consumers, and I think that the line between this is a fashion retail company, this is a media company, this is a beauty company, that line is becoming super blurry. And companies are now, because again, consumers want to find everything in one place and they want everything to be as easily handed to them as possible. We're now tasked with doing a lot more than just writing celebrity and fashion and style news articles. But it's a really cool time though, because again, media is shifting and it's putting a lot of investment into technology, and it's just like an energizing opportunity because again, Vogue has this an enormous brand equity that yes, there's all of these new players like in the space, but Vogue has the luxury of the fact that it's been around for 125 years. This is the 125th anniversary of Vogue this year that we're just closing on, and there is just such a massive audience there that we are just able to capture, and there's a whole new audience that we now have that we're now tasked with capturing to this younger, more Instagram savvy audience, and again, people who might be shifting away from like reading traditional news sites, but we're able. I think we've been doing a lot. Again, A/B testing. We're pretty much testing all of our releases. Our head of products in the back, and he's got us in a really good place with thinking like what's the minimum viable product that we can get out the door so that we can test it and then learn really quickly. Kind of that app that I was talking about earlier that we worked on at another brand that I was at, that app would have cost us $500,000 to make, and if it sucked, we would have lost $500,000 really fast. Like our new approach, like our new workflow enables us to make much smaller mistakes and learn from them way faster. And again, we work really closely with our analysts. I think a big part of the data piece that you were mentioning earlier, how sometimes you are looking at the wrong data, we now go into like our test situations and say, what are the criteria that we want to look at? Because there's so much data out there, but if you're, first of all, it's overwhelming and you're not going to get the same takeaways. Just like you don't need all that data in some cases. You just need to know where to focus on because like, if you can't measure it, you really can't manage it going forward, and you can't create a strategy off of it. If you're just kind of like shooting from the hip and saying like, oh, I think this might work, it might, but it also might cost you. And so I think that we've kind of gotten into a really good workflow with like testing what we're doing and making smaller mistakes, but also not even viewing them as mistakes, but just learning opportunities. We've released a lot of cool products, especially in the past few months. We just did our first Google Home activation. So
we got a demo for this.
Yeah, what?
We got a demo for this.
It's really cool. So if you have a Google Home device, you can go home and say, okay, talk to Vogue. But it's just kind of learning those different platforms and understanding where people are. We're not just viewing Vogue as a magazine or Vogue.com as a website. We're viewing it as like a million different digital properties that we have access to an audience at. And so it's also like it's also not just like throwing spaghetti at the wall and be like, oh, we could try that and see if it works. Like we're making really strategic decisions based on who we know our users are. We have a super affluent user, and this user shops at Glossier, uses the Runway, and all of these things. So all of these are connected. And so, well, at the end of the day, I did work at an e-commerce company for a little while, and at the end of the day, you were benchmarked your performance on whether it was a good day or a bad day if you hit your sales forecast goals, like what you were supposed to sell that day. We don't have that same type of conversion goal, but we do have an audience goal, and we have a time spent goal, and we have a habit goal. And so we're looking at like very specific criteria to make sure that we're hitting our goals so that we can grow. And again, too, all of these things are coming into play. Like again, the lines are just really muddy now. And there's just opportunity though. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. But so we've been trying Google Home, and that's really cool. We also, again, we have a we're trying to get a hold of a younger audience, and we're reaching a younger audience. We just released an iMessage stickers app, which is really fun. We have like gorgeously illustrated stickers. And again, too, it comes with that like Vogue stamp of approval. There's one of them that's really cool. The first time you do something like really amazing at Vogue, the really big thing is that you get an AWOK, which is like, yeah, which is like amazing. Like all the editors get it. It's like a sticker that goes on like your first really great piece of work. And so there's like a really fun like AWOK sticker in the pack. So
Do you
there's
want to describe what that is?
yeah, so Anna Winter, okay. So, and it's just like a really fun sticker, but we're doing all of these things to bring Vogue into people's hands, and we're reaching audiences in places that we haven't before. And again, all of that just comes back to knowing who our user is by looking at the right piece of data.
That's super insightful. I do want to be mindful of time. So I'll just go to the last question, and this is for all of you. So what are you excited about in fashion and beauty tech space at the moment? It can be a brand, company, tool, technology. It's totally open. So let's start with you.
Can I add one thing to the data piece first?
Yeah, absolutely.
Real quick though.
Please.
So I think one important distinction is, and we also care about data a lot. We try to be, as an organization, be extremely data driven. But I think that in addition to A/B testing, which you have to do, otherwise you're kind of like flying blind in a way. I think that qualitative insights are really, really important. And a lot of times what people end up testing and A/B testing are like very small incremental changes. Like the color of a button, or a person looking left or right, and those things obviously there's some makes a difference, but sometimes there are very, very obvious things that are unclear about the value proposition of your product, or other things where actually talking to people is incredibly helpful and can ultimately give the biggest lift. So we have as many, as an example, we have as many UX researchers as we have product designers, and I think that's a really important part of our philosophy too, is like actually having a conversation with people as much as possible, which is sometimes challenging because you also get feedback in so many different places, including Instagram comments and people reaching out to our customer support team and so on. So in terms of apps that I'm excited about, I recently heard a talk on the Nike sneakers app. I don't know if anyone uses this here, but what I really love about it is that they're able to they realize that their target customer, the sneakerhead, is so excited about any upcoming product launch, and they have, I think, like 500,000 monthly active users on the app, that as soon as they drop a new shoe that people are excited about, then the few hundred pieces that they have used to sell out within seconds on Nike.com, and would actually crash the site. So they came up with an entirely new philosophy where instead of ultimately coming up with a product where if you have 500,000 interested people, but you can only sell 200 of them, that means that the vast majority of your users is ultimately going to be unhappy and will have an unsatisfying experience if they add the product to their cart and can't even complete checkout. They're also adding friction, which was what I was talking about earlier. In that there's an element of discovery in the app. A lot of the drops happen in very secretive and fun ways at first. So there was a good example. I think in January there was a shoe that came out that I think Penny Hardaway wore 20 years ago for the Orlando Magic. There's a whole story around it, how the shoe, for Orlando Magic at that time, any shoe had to be predominantly black with blue accents on it, and it was a blue shoe. So you could only wear it for a quarter, and then after that quarter, basically came in with a pencil and colored in some of the parts that were blue in the shoe. So there was an iconic story. They had an editorial piece about it. And then as a user, if you actually took the time to swipe through the entire gallery, the last image would lock, and then you realize you could start, swiping across the image, and would actually end up coloring the shoe the same way Penny did. And if you finish that, a video would pop up and say, "Congratulate you that you unlocked that shoe." So you were one of the 200 people that were able to do that, and that's something that people started sharing immediately and so on. And that's just one example of how they think about their product launches now, which I think is really, really smart way to approach that very specific target.
That's awesome. Let's move down the line, Chaya, any thoughts here?
So besides for click to fit, of course, which is
Of course.
looking to transform every aspect of the design and retail process to make it better, easier, and more productive and profitable. The two things that I'm seeing that I've been really excited about lately is one is focus on trying to actually make whatever time you have with the customer more enjoyable, because there was this perception of shopping was fun and it stopped being fun for most customers. And it's some of that is the recognition that people don't have time and they're much more focused on experiences now. But retailers have started realizing it's what they have to do if they actually want to engage customers. And it's no longer that build it and they will come model. And they can't rely on customer shopping there when they're unhappy, which even the most loyal customers historically were. Over 75% of customers were unhappy with their primary retailer up until a few years ago. And that was before they started even, having more options. And the other thing that I'm noticing is companies are starting to fill in the gaps, which is also going to lead the designers and retailers to recognize, hey, there are gaps here that are not being met. So Stitch Fix, thank you. I'm like, I've never had to say it, it's hard to say. Stitch Fix, their most successful products with literally, I think it was 99% of their sales now, are a few products that they're designing based on gaps in the market. So they found that there are certain features that customers want, and there are no products available. Like, they've tried looking for them. They can't find products with these features. They're using machine learning to identify those features and then designing products with those features. Guess what? What they're saying is that their most successful products for customers that are not any particular market category other than we want to make our lives easier by using a stylist. 99% of what they're buying isn't available on the market, which shows a huge opportunity. And I think that the more successful they become, and other companies like that, the more designers and retailers will recognize what we've been doing hasn't been working, and the data is there. And all we need to do is actually start listening and creating products that the customers want, and they will buy more. And from that perspective, the fact that companies are starting to actually succeed with using data, I think is triggering a really, really wonderful shift in the industry that I think is going to lift everybody's sales and experiences.
Awesome. Christine, any thoughts?
Well, I'm super excited about ShopSailo. And to plug it again, but also given I think what I'm excited about is technology being enabled, and also ShopSailo can do it too. We're talking about the fashion industry. We're talking about a lot of this progress, and I think what you're talking about also with technology will allow companies to become more efficient, more effective, and for customers to buy exactly what they need rather than purchase what they don't really want and maybe throw it out and or return it or whatever, and then have it marked down and then end up in a landfill somewhere. So what I'm very excited about, I guess it's more of a broad conversation, is that technologies or companies are looking at efficiencies to become more sustainable. The fashion industry is the second largest polluter in the world next to oil, and across a myriad of ways. So I think that is important to me. We're never going to stop buying stuff. We're never going to stop shopping, but we're really seeing the growth in, like Rent the Runway, a model where you can try something out before you buy it. The Real with reselling luxury handbags. Within ShopSailo, we're also, another channel of ours is to create a secondary market where anybody can kind of use the app. I'm tired of my sweater right now. Let me go sell it. So sort of an online, like an eBay version on Instagram. So that's sort of what I'm excited about, is sort of to see how technology can really, and companies can really spearhead more mindful purchasing and sustainability in our industry.
That's amazing. Kelsey?
Standard expected answer, Rent the Runway, clearly. Otherwise I wouldn't be working here. I think predominantly for the sustainability aspect. I studied as a designer. They railed in my head at design school, like sustainability, cradle to cradle design, cycles. And so, hearing about the massive amount of waste in the fashion industry just kills me inside. And I think there's a much better way to do it outside of fashion and tech, but very related. Drones. I'm so excited for the day when I have something delivered to me by a drone, and I hope that's a Rent the Runway dress.
Is that next, perhaps?
It's unlikely to happen in New York anytime soon. The law doesn't allow it here.
You have to register
Not
your
yet.
drones in New York.
They let them fly you?
It depends where, you have to register them.
Kate.
Well, I think a little separately, just like kind of thinking outside of like Vogue and outside of media, but conversational commerce, I think is something that's really interesting. Like buying things over chat, over text. You look at a lot of like the Asian markets and just thinking just globally outside of the US, a lot of purchases are made through like WeChat and through WhatsApp, you know what I mean? Like a lot of that stuff is where commerce is happening. And so I think that there's a lot with messaging that you can do, especially for personalization and becoming more efficient. I think there's a lot of cool stuff there. And even just in terms of like recommendation engines and that kind of thing, and just making everything smarter. Allure has a super cool bot coming out. I think it's tonight, actually.
Actually, I'm gonna give a shout out to Chelsea.
Wait, it's tonight, right?
We're live right now.
Yeah, okay. There's like a super, they're working with like, like personalized beauty recommendations. And I just think that there's a lot of cool stuff in that space. And again, like we're just starting to experiment with it. But I'm interested in that kind of stuff in general.
Awesome. What is the URL, Chelsea, for the beauty bot? Is there a URL?
Yeah, allure.com/beauty.
It's a chat bot, guys.
Yeah, but just again, like finding things in a more efficient way. And I just think that again, like we're spending 90%. I mean, I think the app I use most is iMessage or WhatsApp. So how can we get what we want online where we're already spending our time? So just something cool to think about.
Amazing. This is the future of beauty and fashion tech, guys. Thank you so much, guys. We are gonna take 2 maybe questions from the audience. So anyone has any questions? She raised her hand first.
So actually, I'm from a designer. So
Could you speak up a little bit?
Yes, I'm from a designer point of view. So I am a fashion designer, saw all my collections out there. And I was constantly brainstorming what can make my product stand out. So I think I've met a lot of other entrepreneurs, like who are fashion designers. And I do see that there's a trend coming from the design world that they want to merge the borders of that. Meaning that you wear something to work, you wear something for fun, and we're going to merge that so that someone will not rush into runway events room and change. And we got to merge the role of a stylist. What if we can incorporate the role of a stylist when we design it, rather than having a second opinion from the outside to tell you what to wear? And that is actually a hidden cost to the customer, because you need to pay for that expertise to tell you what to wear. So the future, from our designer's point of view, we're going to combine everything so that people can switch one occasion to another without even worry about things. You can just wear your red lipstick, go out from an investor meeting to see your date, and then switch it back seamlessly. And that is what I'm doing. And I'm launching in November. But I do appreciate everybody's opinion out there. And I would say, like, many designers, right from grad school, have no idea what they're doing or whatever, but then you just see the trend. But I would like to hear your opinion, because I want to add a lot of selling points to my products. And I also wanted to add a lot of innovative fabrics from a technology background. But then a lot of people from the retail world with the older mindset, they're like, oh, you need to focus on the look. You don't need to worry about the fabric. Maybe the women are not in need for high-tech fabric. Maybe they just want to shop the look. And then that actually heavily influences my pricing. Because if I want to buy a good fabric from Italy, they have wrinkle resistant, water resistant, other great opportunities I think women would love. But then I've heard different voices that are saying, you know, they just want to shop for the look.
Not to cut you, I think and I'm sure you guys can speak a lot more to it, just because I'm like not from like a retail company, but I think a large part of that is the messaging for the consumer. And I do think that people, especially like I hate the word millennials, but just like people under the age of 35. And I just think people in general care more about how things are made now, and people care, like they want to be the first to be able to share a piece of knowledge about something. Like, oh, did you know that this is merino wool? And do you know that merino wool doesn't like wick sweat the same way that cotton? You know what I mean? It's all of that stuff. People want to be the first to share information. So I think a lot of that has to do with how like marketing messages are communicated, but people do care, I think, how things are made and where they're coming from.
I think there's also a lot of data that you could be looking at as opposed to asking, like, it used to be that you had no choice but to ask the experts. And people had their perspective that wasn't necessarily shaped by the actual research. There's a lot of research out there backing up some of the things that you wanted to do that you've been told you shouldn't do. So for example, there's a lot of data backing up the importance of fabrics to people, especially when they're buying online. And as a new brand, where most of the new brands that are succeeding or making their mark is that they're doing something that's different than what's been out there. Yes, there are still a handful of designers that manage to make it big, based on creating this superstar look that takes the world by storm. But those have always been few and far between, and most of them never make money. They become part of a bigger brand that basically subsidizes them. There are smaller brands that have been successful based on building a small cult following based on the designs, but overall the brands that have been successful has been based on telling a story or meeting a need that hasn't been met. So there are a lot of companies that are focused specifically on fabrics. There are a lot of companies focused on a specific type of consumer. I think that there are things that you talked about that are what really speaks to you, that excite you most about what you're trying to do. And there are people that are trying to talk you out of it. And I think that the job of any entrepreneur is to learn how to hear that deep inner voice that's driving them, and then to be able to do the research to either shut that idea down or run with it, because there's this idea inside you that you want to be doing that's well above and beyond the idea of just designing beautiful clothing. And my gut is that that's that dream that you're trying to build. And from all the research that I've done, and I've done a significant amount of research on the market, I think you're tapping into a lot of unmet needs, and there's a lot of data to back it up. So if you need to be able to have the numbers to tell your story to convince other people, the numbers are there. The question is that what you want to be doing? And if so, then make it happen.
We're gonna take one more question, probably you, but I did want to say feel free to approach the panelists later. We're gonna have like some mingling time. So if you guys have questions that don't get acknowledged, please approach the panelists later. Right, go ahead.
And can I just add one more thing?
Yeah.
Nowadays with things like Kickstarter, you have a very easy way to prove your point without having to put any money into it. Because Kickstarter and other crowdfunding platforms allows you to take orders without actually creating the product. So you can validate your idea before you have to make it reality, and it allows you to prove that there is a demand for it.
There's also another voice coming from the traditional retail designers. They're like Kickstarter and Indiegogo and other platforms. A, you're never selling something more expensive, more mass market. And B, a lot of great ideas got copyright out of it. Now, there are many cases that even people just make a complete copycat of you.
Everything in fashion is a copycat. If you're trying to do it based on creating a unique design that nobody's going to knock off within a day or two, you're in the wrong industry.
So easy to copy, I say. Yeah. It's just like you move the button a little bit, and you count the microcourse and how
But it's a way for you to get feedback as to whether or not the things that you're trying to focus on above and beyond the design element are of interest to the consumer, and if they're willing to spend the money and pay for it.
And also, I think it's also difficult because I want to design for older women, and a lot of them are not online. And
Actually, they are.
Let's
Oh my God,
actually
that's
take
like-
that offline because I do want to move to your question.
Sorry.
No, I just, go ahead. What was your question?
Hi, I have a question for you, Chaya. So we have seen that there are a lot of online companies now who don't have brick and mortar stores at all. So how are they? You spoke about how brick and mortar stores are going into e-commerce, but how does it work the other way around? How are the numbers working the other way around? Because we see a lot of companies now which are only e-commerce, except for Amazon. They are these small companies from China and other places where they've been selling these small products that you said are filling up these gaps, and people are looking. So how is sales for them working out?
So the US market is very different than other parts of the world. And I'm primarily familiar with sales in the US. I can tell you that in the US, there aren't that many small brands that are only sold online on their own sites directly to consumer. And most, the ones that are really, really tiny. You have several, they're considered large for e-commerce, but they're not actually large in the scale of retail. So companies like ASOS, for example, they're actually tiny compared to other retail brands that are brick and mortar. They're not even in the realm of a mid-sized retailer, but they're large e-commerce retailers. Some of those products are private label, some of them are not. But they've spent a tremendous amount of time and money building their brand and getting a following. The vast majority of stores that are successful online are also focused on or starting to move towards also selling in the real world, because consumers do need to interact that way. And what's been an interesting trend is that because retail has been failing, a lot of brick and mortar stores have been shutting down stores. And I mean, it was easy enough to predict because you could see how brick and mortar drives e-commerce. Their e-commerce sales are actually flagging as a result. They're having lower traffic, lower sales, etc. Until technology comes out to market in a meaningful way, and the technology has actually been there for a long time, retailers have yet to figure out how to stick with it and promote it. They're used to other people doing that work. So for example, Bloomingdale's has tried many, many different technologies, but they've never actively promoted it to their customers. They expect the technology companies to do it, which then doesn't succeed, and then they take the technology offline or it just sits there and doesn't do much work. There's a lot of technology that's existed for over 15 years that can actually show customers exactly what the products are going to look like on them, can drapes the fabric in real time, and is not that expensive, and it's accurate. When you start having, on a mass scale, the ability to know exactly what you're getting, not having to guess even on things like the quality, which I still have to guess when I order products online, it takes away a lot of the risk factor. As long as that risk factor is there, am I buying it? Is the point, am I taking it to the dressing room? There's a very high likelihood I'm going to return all of it. And because of that, smaller brands, which are a lot less likely to have free shipping and free returns, they can't afford to have that level of returns. It's a very hard route to take. In my experience, the ones that have succeeded, at least in the US, are the ones that have other ways of also exposing customers to their brands. And they start with building a very slow, loyal following and getting traction and growing virally and really, really knowing their customer. I know that certain Asian markets are very, very different. In Europe, the return rates are a lot lower in most countries. Germany, if I'm not mistaken, has really high return rates. So it really depends upon the specifics of that country and how people shop and how many options they have. But I think that the real thing about it is if your product is really unique and it's something that customers want and they can't get elsewhere, that's what makes people really willing to do it. So it's what makes people willing to go out on a limb, spend more money, take a risk, etc. So if you're reaching out to a target market that isn't really being met, so for example, plus size older women looking for chic workwear that they can wear out to work afterwards for dinner at an affordable price point that's going to meet, there's not a lot of options out there. If they have enough of confidence to know that they're going to like it and it'll probably work for them, if they've tried everything else and it hasn't worked, they're much more likely to take a risk. If I have a bunch of other choices and it doesn't cost me anything, why it's been very hard to get them to do it.
I think we're gonna end the panel right here. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you guys for coming out. Please feel free to stay and talk to the panelists and talk to us. Back there are Condé folks. Kate and I are Condé folks. So. All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
She's amazing. You need to